Hi, and welcome back to the History Hut. This is part 3 of our discussion of the peopling of the Americas. So we've discussed a few civilizations, but who's up next?
Well, after the Olmec, you have the Teotihuacan, a word I love. And so just a few words about them, and of course they're kind of in between, and then the big fancy ones are the Maya and the Aztec. But the Teotihuacan, they had a main city of the same name, Teotihuacan, with about 3,000 buildings. They controlled, remember I was saying the obsidian trade, they controlled the obsidian trade, and they also manufactured obsidian tools. And like the Olmec, you know, they have all the things, the ball game, the sacred monuments, the writing, the city. The city in this case looks as though the population might have been as high at times as 200,000. So that rivals the cities that we talked about in China in terms of that size. The Teotihuacan were a warlike people, but as well as that, they add something to what we already have with the Olmec. They add a more advanced agricultural technique with a thing called the chinampas system. That's a nice word too. It's also called the floating gardens. They don't really float at all, but really what it is swamp agriculture. So what they do is they take a swampy area, they cut channels through it so that you can take your boat up the channels, and then they would make this grid, and they would get a piece of, a kind of square piece of land, dump as much soil as they could into it, put wooden stakes around it, and then grow trees in it, and then the hope is that there'll be no soil erosion, and so then you could actually have livestock and things. And there are no cows in the Americas, but turkeys, you can have turkeys and things like that there. So it stops the soil washing out. It's a really, really sophisticated new system. So you have that, and of course other cultures following will use the chinampas system to great effect. No real idea about what happens to the Teotihuacan. They are warlike, and their cities seem to be deserted by about 700 AD. It may have been famine. It's probably some kind of plague as well. And so after them, you get the Toltec and the Maya. So you get the Toltec and the Maya, and the Toltec and Maya actually kind of amalgamates. So the height of their power is about the year 1000 AD. So the Maya are really the next group up, but having all of the things that we've talked about from the Olmec plus the chinampas system of the Teotihuacan.
Teotihuacan.
The Teotihuacan. One of the problems with knowing about the Maya is, of course, again, we're talking about the lack of a writing system. That's not really the case. They have hieroglyphs and pictographs and all sorts of things. But they also, by writing on stone, they also wrote in these codexes. They wrote in these folding books, and they're absolutely amazing. And I don't know if you'll be able to see this or not. This is just from one of the 4 remaining Mayan codices. That's the Dresden Codex. So these great folding books. But when the Spanish came to the Americas and they looked at these books and they saw that there were snakes and jaguars and all sorts of animals in them, they believed that they were heretical. And so most of them were burned. And in particular, it's Diego de Landa, a Franciscan who was sent as a missionary to the Maya, that ordered all of these Mayan books be found and be destroyed. But later on, oddly enough, in the 1560s, he wrote a book on the Mayan himself, describing their hieroglyphics and their customs and their way of life, the relations of the Maya of the Yucatan. I've talked about the religious practices and their history, so it's through that we know a lot of them. The man that actually destroyed all the stuff that we know about them. And this book that he wrote was lost to everybody until it was rediscovered in Madrid in 1869. And so that's when we found out a bit more about him. So there's only 4 codexes remain because they were, or parts of 4 codexes remain because they were burned as heretical. And we know about the Maya from these codexes, and of course, as soon as they were able to crack the Mayan code, then these codexes became absolutely important. And there are all sorts of stories about them going back to people that were interested in them from a long, long time ago. But I think one of the most interesting and coolest stories is of Yuri Nazarov, who was a Soviet soldier, and of course, with the Soviet army, 1945, ends up in Berlin for the liberation of Berlin, and goes into a building that is on fire, which happens to be the National Library, runs into this building, picks up a book, runs back out, and by God, hasn't he picked up one of the 4 remaining Mayan codexes?
Huh.
It's just like crazy. What are the odds that that would happen? You know, it's just wild. So, of course, he takes it home, takes it back to Russia, and is fascinated by it, and spends the next 7 years trying to decipher it and trying to work out what. So there's people in the West working on this, but he's in Russia working on this, and he correctly sussed that it was partly pictorial and partly phonetic, and that went against what Western scholars were saying. His work was carried on in 1960 by a Russian-American scholar. Her name is Tatiana Proskuriakov, I believe. And so she did some further work. And then Peter Matthews, who's now, I think, at U of C, and Linda Shealy from Texas worked on it. And they've completely, I think they've broken 95% of the code.
Wow.
It was absolutely amazing. So Linda Shealy working at the University of Texas. And they just brought a book. She's just recently deceased. I think it was called The Blood of Kings, and kind of update on what we know. And Peter Matthews at one point was in Mayan territory rescuing, I think, a Mayan altar when he was captured by bandits, and then was in the jungle for, in fear of his life, and just like a crazy kind of Indiana Jones story. It was in all the newspapers. So we actually do know a lot now from these codexes, and they're absolutely amazing to look at, beautiful, and these folding books. So lots of work has been done on it, and it's been since probably about the 1980s, 1990s that they've managed to kind of crack the code. And now, of course, you can take that code and you can go back to the pyramids where they have their glyphs on the fronts of the stairs of the pyramids, and then you can read their history all the way up.
Oh, wow.
Unfortunately, in the 1800s, I think about 1839, Stevens and Catherwood and a bunch of other people were all out exploring, looking for the El Dorado and looking for the Fountain of Youth and all that kind of stuff, and smashing their way through jungles. And can you imagine their shock when, as smashing through jungles and hacking down bits of greenery, they ran right into stone walls. So they rediscovered some of the Mayan cities. And so, of course, they take all the stuff out of that. But the problem was that everybody thought that it was probably a lot of, treasure inside the tombs. And so they were just, ripping the tombs apart, ripping the pyramids apart to get in. And so, of course, they took all the stuff out of order. So if you, first of all, couldn't decipher the stuff, and then secondly, it's not in the right order, it's really, really difficult to work with. So it is a kind of Indiana Jones sort of thing. And, of course, then by the late 1800s, you have the Egyptian craze as well, up to the 19 going in and looking for all the good stuff inside the pyramids. So yeah, so it's really, really very interesting, this whole thing about the codexes.
So let's talk a little more about the Mayans.
Since I've said that we know stuff about them, I suppose we should. They used intensive crop cultivation. They believed that that corn was sentient, that it could feel. And there is part of one of the Mayan creation stories that people are made from corn, and that's why. And of course, the domestication of corn becomes absolutely vital to the continuation of people. So thought that people were made out of corn, that corn was sentient, and Mayan priest rulers claimed divine descent, and they had hereditary nobles that helped them rule. They had scribes to keep the records, and then of course they had just the ordinary people at the very bottom. So they were pyramid builders. So they built pyramids. They liked the idea of divine kingship, and they carved the dead king's likenesses in stone. They built large cities, larger even than the Teotihuacan. They had temples, plazas, pyramids, really quite extensive. And of course, as I mentioned, they develop a comprehensive writing system, but it's mostly on stone and in these burned codices. They're great at astronomy and and great at math as well. They had ball courts for the sacred game, the sacred ball game. They had 2 calendars. I'll mention the calendars in a minute. So they have the Olmec one and then a different one as well. They practice swamp agriculture. So they use the chinampas. They're preoccupied by war for territory, first of all, and then secondly for human sacrifice. And their form of human sacrifice was decapitation. When we come to the Aztec, we'll see that it's not decapitation, it's plucking the live hearts out of victims as they're being sacrificed. So it's 2 different kind of methods. They have a polytheistic religion, and they need human sacrifices for some of the gods. So lots of sacrificial stuff. People lived in extended families of maybe 10 to 20, and you get the absolute typical gender division of labor: men farm and hunt, women are at home weaving and cooking and cleaning and bringing up the children. And most people farmed these chinampas plots, and it looks as though it was not just one big kingdom, but an empire of city-states. So each city-state would be self-governing, but there were alliances between them. So there's about 20 of them. They coexisted, but they're independent of each other, and there's no overarching confederation, nothing like that. And gradually there are 2 alliances that form, centered on the cities of Tikal, it's one of their key cities, and Calakmul, and they do this through diplomatic marriages and military alliances. But by about the year 1000, when they seem to be at their height, this is also the period when they seem to go into decline as well, so that the city-state thing collapses. There's some new work at Palenque, which is another one of their cities, that suggests that the city of Palenque was flourishing up until the 9th century, and that's quite early, really, if their heyday is a bit longer, but that it's abandoned very abruptly. So it's a great puzzle for archaeologists trying to work out. And again, it may have something to do with famine or plague. But the new work at Palenque suggests that the kings were building ever larger structures, so they were building more and more things, and so these building schemes of the rulers might have been responsible for that, because they needed to log the forests to sustain the stucco construction, so that depleted the forests and it undermined agriculture, and it might have forced a sudden migration out of the cities. So and also they picked the best land for the cities. So that would have been better for agricultural land, right? So all sorts of things like that.
Call themselves a civilization.
I know. They're like, oh, that's nice farming land. I think I'll buy a house on it, build a house on it. So they remember.
Mind you, that's kind of what happens in cities today, isn't it?
That's true.
Buy a farm,
and you buy
put
a
up a development.
And, put up like 50 houses.
Maybe they weren't far off.
Yeah, so maybe that's the deal then too. So they have 2 calendars. We talked about the calendars before. The Aztec will follow this. The first calendar is called the Hab. It's a 365-day civil calendar, 18 months of 20 days each, and 5 at the end, called the Wayab. And the Wayab, it was bad luck to be born in the 5 days at the end of the calendar. So he's like, no. They also have one called the Zolkin, and that's the Olmec one, the 260-day ritual or sacred calendar. And it's, again, 13 months of 20 days, just like the Olmec one. And they use this for planting and harvesting, and, of course, for sacrificing, because you have to know when the appropriate time is to sacrifice.
Absolutely.
And these 2 calendars return to the same beginning every 18,980 days, or every 52 years of the civil calendar and 73 years of the other one. So every 52 years, it's a 52-year cycle that you talk about. So every 52 years, the 2 calendars start again on the same day, and this is highly significant. We'll see this for the Aztec as well, because it's considered a time when the sun might not return, so you might need to up the sacrifices, and a time when the gods might visit. Now, for the Aztec, it's unfortunate, really, that 1519, the year that Hernan Cortes and all his light-skinned, friendly, happy Spanish companions arrive in Aztec territory, and that happens to be part of the cycle. It's called a one-reed year. They're expecting visits from the gods. They're like, oh, I wonder if these are visitors from the gods. And so don't, automatically take them down when they've got the chance. So the Maya have this. They also have the long count, or the great cycle. And it's based on the 360 plus 5-day year. It's 5,130 years long, and at the end of it, the world is thought to come to a complete stop. So it's dated to begin in 3113 BC, and so the due date for the end of the world is either the 21st or the 23rd of December 2012. So don't buy any Christmas presents that year, because the whole world might end. So,
and if you make it to Christmas Eve, go mad.
Yeah, well, yeah, just don't even wait.
If you make it to Christmas Eve, you go, oh boy, I haven't bought any Christmas presents yet.
That's right. That's right. I'm always thinking, well, I don't think I'll pay off my Visa card that year.
Yeah.
You know, just in case. That would be great. So just like run up a bunch of debt, and then
it'd be great, except that the world would be over.
Probably won't end. So and the Mayans also calculated that Venus would return to the same position every 584 days, and after 252-year cycles, it had made 65 revolutions, and so they would celebrate this every 104 years. So at the 104-year point, they always celebrated it. So they're really accurate in their astronomy. And they only used sticks, so they would use 2 sticks like that, and then they would look through the right angle and look at the night sky. And Chichen Itza, which is another one of their places, one of the buildings there is believed to be a Mayan observatory, because its windows line up with the setting sun on the spring equinox on the 21st of March, and they have sight lines for the moon as well. So from this, they're actually able to calculate the length of the year, and we've seen this in the Arab world and also in India, calculate the length of the year to 365.242 days. So fairly exact, when the modern value is 365.242198 days. Practically the same, using just this.
That's
not,
pretty good.
You know, any specific and fancy stuff. They're also great on calculations for the lunar month. They used their observatory at Copan, and also their one at Palenque. So in Copan, they looked at or they decided that 149 lunar months lasted 4,400 days, and that gives 29.5302 days as the length of the lunar month. So 29.5302. And at Palenque in Tabasco, they calculated a smaller amount, but also came up with 29.5308 days. And the modern value is 29.53059. So they're not far off.
It's not bad.
Using very basic observatories with no real
non-civilized
equipment and non-civilized, and with 2 little sticks held up as a cross, and they managed to calculate that. So fabulous at astronomy, fabulous at mathematics, great calendars, important for rituals, and also you know, kind of solar and lunar calendars. Sophisticated cities, a writing system, they have it all. And
it sounds more sophisticated than me, and I'm from the I'm modern. I'm from the present
modern?
day.
Are you?
Yeah.
You're not a
I can't do any of
Neanderthal
that
or
stuff.
anything.
Yeah.
You can't. No. Well, we should try.
Yeah.
I'll show you the technique, and we'll get 2 sticks. We'll see if we can calculate anything at all. Probably not. I'm always thinking
You could probably do a right angle.
I'd be totally useless in somebody's nuclear bomb shelter, because all I could do is tell them about the past. I wouldn't actually know. And go, well, you know, they did have electricity in the past, and they're
always going on about the past.
Gas fires,
historians,
and people had barbecues, but I wouldn't know how to actually make any of those things.
That's
so
true.
I don't know how useful I'd be.
Well, that does it for us down in the History Hut here. Join us next time.
It's cold.